So I'm delighted to say joining us for the very first time on the We Are West Ham podcast to look ahead to this Saturday's game at St James's Park. Saturday night, it's the evening game. 5:30 up at St James's is Shaun Custis, head of sport at The Sun. You'll hear him on the press box on Talk Sport, Sun Monday nights, formerly of Sunday Supplement on Sky. You know him from all over the place and a huge Magpies fan. Of course, Shaun, brilliant to have you on the show. First thing is first, of course, Newcastle through to their first major final since 1999. There's a little bit of confusion about when their last major trophy win was, because I, for one, had never heard of the Fairs Cup until a few weeks ago. Yes or no, is that a major trophy? Because that, I believe you won in 1969, but your last trophy that you won that anyone's ever heard of, certainly who's my age, was 1955.
1955 FA Cup, that's correct. Won the FA Cup 3 times in the 50s. Last time won the league's 1927. And the last trophy is the Intercities Fair Cup in 1969, which at the time you would consider a major trophy. Well, it was the forerunner to the UEFA Cup, but UEFA have since tried to discredit it because in order to qualify, it was one city, one club. And we apparently qualified because they couldn't have Liverpool and Everton in it. So we got the next place in order to qualify for it, then won it. And they now say it doesn't really count as a proper European trophy, although we don't listen to that. We won the European trophy. We won the UEFA Cup. And it's images for everybody in the Northeast. Those images of Bob Moncur lifting that trophy, who's the captain of Newcastle, are still in everybody's brain. You see them all around town. You'll see them in St James's Park. You'll even see Bob Moncur around, who still looks as fit as he did there when he was the captain, 1969. It was a huge thing for us, but I was too young to remember it. I know the history. We beat Richest, and it's as I say, brilliant time. I also have bitter memories of the 74 Cup final defeat by Liverpool, the 76 League Cup final defeat by Man City, and the losses to Arsenal and Man United in 98 and 99 in the FA Cup. Absolutely nothing. Yeah, even you lot have won a trophy since we won a trophy.
True story. So how old do you have to be to have heard of the Fairs Cup? Because I'm 31. James, who I do the podcast with, is 36, I believe. And I'm pretty sure that's off his radar.
But that's the point, isn't it? Every Newcastle fan has heard of the Fairs Cup because they know it's the last thing that we ever won. So even if you're 10 years old or 15 years old, your father my grandfather used to tell us about the FA Cup wins and even the league title win, actually. But the FA Cup wins particularly because, we always win the FA Cup, he used to say to me. And I'm like, well, it's 1972 now, Grandad, and we haven't won it since 1955. So when's that going to happen? And then when we got to the final, of course, in 74, the FA Cup final, he said, they are, told you. And then we got absolutely stuffed.
So, all right, compare it then, because West Ham fans will hark back to the Intertoto Cup win of the late 90s.
We won that too.
Yeah? That was 4 winners you had of
4
that,
winners, yeah. Don't knock it. We'll take anything.
Yeah, so would you say, and we're obviously still in the knockout stage of the Conference League this season, I feel like I know what you're going to say, but the Intercity Fairs Cup, as it was then called, more of an achievement to win
massively
than
different. Massively
the
different.
Conference and Intertoto, but better, I'm asking.
It's bigger than the Conference League. I would say that, but at the time, you've got to remember at that time, there would be only one team qualifying for the European Cup in those days, and only I'm not sure how many teams would qualify for the Intercities Fairs Cup, but the rule was definitely one city, one club. I can't remember how many teams qualified for it. I do remember Newcastle and Southampton playing against each other in 1970 in that competition. There was some big matches against Glasgow Rangers, obviously in a different country, but it was huge. It was a big occasion. Nobody would knock it and say this is an insignificant little trophy. That was a big trophy, a big thing to win. But it's time we've got those black and white images off the main stage, if you like, and put some colour ones in there. So hopefully that'll happen against, I presume, Manchester United.
Manchester United, do you think, recording this just before Manchester United's second leg
You're not
against
really
Forest,
expecting them to concede 3, are you, or 4? Anyway.
You wouldn't have thought so, would you? So, I mean, obviously, it's you paint the picture really well there of what a big deal it is. You saw the scenes outside St James's last night, but what most people, a lot of the talk around Newcastle at the moment is, of course, the huge Saudi Arabian shaped or coloured asterisk that's going to be next to that of the team for a while. That there is a sense, when you've got Sean Longstaff and Dan Burn, hardly the most glamorous of Premier League players, coming out to do the post-match interviews after you've reached your first major final since 1999, it's hardly, it's hard to suggest that it's all just money, because West Ham fans would have been up in arms if we'd signed either of those two players. Eddie Howe seems to have done a sterling job. Is it going to be, you sort of sense this will be the first of many, and how does that asterisk that I mentioned, the Saudi Arabian effect, sort of how much of a factor is that at the moment, sort of in Newcastle's success?
Well, if you're a journalist worth your salt, you're going to be conflicted, aren't you, by what goes on in Saudi Arabia. It doesn't always sit easy. The problem is when you've never won anything and craved success and you're just begging for something on the football field, and the Mike Ashley era, which you went through, which was a pretty miserable time, that this is great fun to watch. But it's still hard sometimes to separate everything off. And most Newcastle fans would say that it's not always easy to separate the two. But right now, I'm afraid to get to a League Cup final is just, everything else is I have to say, is probably cast aside. I've got so many mates and work colleagues all looking for tickets, saying, how can we get them? It's going to be, I mean, I think there's something like 45,000 season ticket holders. They're not all going to be accommodated. There will be, I'm pretty sure, tens of thousands of Newcastle fans in London for that weekend who don't have tickets in Trafalgar Square or whatever. This is the biggest cup occasion for, well, as you say, 24 years. But also, most Newcastle fans will tell you, and maybe West Ham fans would think similar to this, they would rather win a trophy than qualify for the Champions League. I honestly do not care about qualifying for the Champions League. The only thing I'm bothered about is winning a trophy. And it's only the League Cup. I mean, if you're a Man City fan or a Man City player, you win the League Cup, you stick it on the team bus, you take it back, you probably plonk it on the reception desk at the training ground and go home and say, oh, yeah, we won it. And tomorrow's another day. This is completely different for Newcastle United supporters. And I know we always go on about, oh, we're great, we're a big club, we've got the best supporters and all of that. But you will see what that is like when it comes to the final. It'll be like nothing you've ever seen. Honestly, it'll be huge. And I'm sure I get loads of West Ham fans going, oh, get lost. Geordies. They're always like that. And people do find us a bit annoying in that regard.
You do have that. I think most people. Well, certainly, I'm talking for me and most people. I find you do definitely have the we're a cut above the rest of you vibe. A bit like, but you carry it far better than a club like, or than a fan base like Leeds, for example. I think when do you know what I mean? When the Geordies do it, I think maybe it's the accent and it's just a bit. There's just a more affable people, I think. Whereas,
but we can only be a cut above as fans because we've got nothing else to boast about. We've got nothing else to boast about. So the only trophy we can have is, we're the best fans. So there.
But don't you think as well that I don't know if this is, I'm being disparaging inadvertently, but whereby you sense that for fans of some clubs, the football team is a far more important and prevalent part of their lives day to day, week to week, than it is for fans of other clubs. You don't really get too many Fulham fans, do you? Going, oh, God, I'm so desperate for us to win on Saturday because my whole week's ruined and I've just loved the club for such a long time.
It's a way of life for the city. It's the ground is like the cathedral on the hill. It's in the middle of the city. You see it, wherever you are in the city, you can see that ground. You can see the top of the ground even as you approach the city from 2 miles out. You can see the ground, and it is the focal point of the city. And of course, you've got to remember as well, where it's only a one club city. I mean, even for West Ham fans, you have a lot of clubs around, so you probably only have to go 3 miles down the road before somebody supports some other club, or 2 miles.
People
down the
aren't
road.
tripping over themselves to go and watch Leighton Orient these days, though. To be fair,
but you're really close to lots of other clubs. So I understand that for us, you can go 60 miles north of Newcastle and have legitimate Newcastle fans right up to the Scottish border, up to Berwick, whatever.
Yeah.
You could call them legitimate Newcastle fans because there's nothing in between.
Yeah.
I mean, with West Ham, I think you'd be slightly suspicious, possibly, of somebody who comes beyond the M25 going north saying they're a West Ham fan.
Yeah, anyone from Hertfordshire, you always give them a bit of a grilling about where their dad grew up. I think and it is now. I would say certainly most just normal match going fans, neutrals, wanted success for the Newcastle fans and empathise with their situation under Mike Ashley. And if you're just a ticket buying fan, you have no say over who buys your club. So I always find it quite difficult to when people are sort of saying, you should be boycotting. It's like, well, if it's the one most important thing you got in your life, you didn't know. It's not like they voted the Saudis in, is it? I always find that a little bit galling. But the Eddie Howe effect, he was asked by Francis Benali, of all people, after the game last night, he was asked whether he would choose the top four qualification or the cup. He gave the answer you'd expect and said he can't choose between the two, etc., etc. It sounds like most Newcastle fans would take the trophy this season anyway, particularly you feel that success will come in the league. On the back of that, Howe said, whatever we can achieve, we will try and achieve. What do you make of the impact he's had on the side at the moment, and how much do you think is him and how much is just a boost from the getting rid of Ashley?
Oh no, quite a lot is him. He does get it. I think it took a little bit hammering into him that a trophy was the most important thing. Obviously, in his mind, I think he would probably prefer to qualify for the Champions League. But I do feel the first trophy, and he's never won one, has he? So the first trophy for him would be a big thing. Look, it was a massive thing for Mourinho when he came into Chelsea. First trophy was a League Cup. Guardiola, first trophy, a League Cup. It sets you on the way. It sets a mark to say this is what we're about. We're about winning trophies. I think Eddie Howe now gets that. He's gone along in quite an understated way, I think, which is Eddie's way, really. I mean, I can think of a few managers who, if we'd got to the cup final, would be doing laps of the pitch and punching the air and doing the old Jurgen Klopp, raising the fist to the skies and all of that with all the players and that. And he didn't do that. And part of me wanted to go, come on, Eddie, we're in a final. Yeah. But he hasn't lived through 50 odd years of not winning a trophy. No matter who, he would have to have been a Geordie to truly understand what it feels like to win zip and never see your team win anything. I
mean, it's been at Bournemouth a long time.
Yeah, but I'll forgive him for the fact he can't necessarily understand that if he doesn't come from the area. But I think he'll realise when he comes to that cup final, just as I say, what it means, how many people will be out in the city, how many people will be out in London, what the build-up will be like. The build-up will be like, again, for a League Cup final, will be ridiculous up there. Ridiculous. It'll be wall-to-wall on the local television. The papers will be full of pullouts and remembering some of the bad old days of failures to win cups and that. And it's really exciting. And how many people get excited really about the League Cup? I dare say if West Ham were in it, I dare say you'd get very excited about it.
It's everyone outside the top six, isn't it?
I think, mind you, Man United might be quite excited about the possibility of winning it this time because it would set a mark for Ten Hag for what he's going to do, and they haven't won anything for a long time. So as a final, it's a juicy affair, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I think it's one of those classic ones in football, isn't it? Anyone below the sort of top four, I think Tottenham fans would snap your arm off for it because it get rid of that Spursy tag. But everyone's just really quick to be disparaging of it when it's one of their rivals who's winning it. But then as soon as, particularly for anyone below the bottom six, fans of those clubs would absolutely love to win it. Shaun, just before we move on then to the game at the weekend, I know it's very difficult for you and your fellow Geordies to actually get excited about the fact that you've got a Premier League game this weekend. Just want to have a quick chat about some of the players. You mentioned Dan Burn and Sean Longstaff there, and I still can't help but giggle a little bit that they're part of a what looks like an extremely successful team. But Joe Linton, I talk about Eddie Howe there, Bruno Guimaraes, who's obviously going to miss the game at West Ham after his red card. I'm surprised he's not being taken to court for GBH. Such was the intense, horrific nature of the challenge. But Guimaraes has obviously been outstanding since he come in. Joe Linton, what happened there? I know he's got in trouble the other day off the pitch for the drink driving stuff. But as far as his on-field exploits go, he looked like a £40 million Roberto Soldado-esque flop. And all of a sudden,
without doubt. I mean, fans couldn't wait to get him out of the club when he... 6 months in, absolute disaster. Signed as a striker, couldn't hit a barn door. It became comical. I think he scored 2 goals in his first 80 games or something. It became a real joke, and everybody just couldn't believe it. And Eddie Howe, this is where you salute great coaching, isn't it? Eddie Howe came in, recognised that he couldn't hit a barn door, and made him a midfield player, and used his strength in midfield to give us a bit of extra edge. When he first... I remember seeing a game against Everton over the Christmas time, maybe 2 years ago, maybe we were COVID then. But he went down the wing and he beat a couple of players, and it was right at the time when he was getting really pilloried. And it was really good. And I thought, actually, he does have a little bit of something. And just gradually... I think there was a confidence thing with him as well. He really, every time he was in the box, it got to the point where he wouldn't dare shoot, even if he was one-on-one with a keeper. He'd look for somebody to pass it to. And Eddie Howe's given him great confidence. He sort of had to work with him in some ways because he had a long contract. He was our record signing at the time. Yeah. 40 million. And he's given him a belief in himself, which he didn't seem to have before. His brilliance, if you like, is really down to the coach. It's all on Howe, that one.
Mad respect for him for that. Up and down the country, I think, because he was that figure of fun, wasn't he? That it looked like his time was limited. Right, let's move on then before we let you go, Sean. We have got a game in the Premier League at the weekend. I don't think many West Ham fans are particularly enthused or confident about the idea of going all the way out the other end of the country against one of the most informed, fizzing teams in the country. The only thing we're clinging on to, I think, is that red card to Guimaraes, which means he'll miss the game, and the fact that you do tend to love a home draw this season. It seems like the
we're not very good at scoring goals. We're not very good at scoring goals. Well, that's the truth of the matter. We've had a consistent run. Getting 2 against Southampton was a bit out of the ordinary, and it wasn't done by a striker. So Wilson's been injured and has been feeling his way back, and it's been a little bit of a struggle for him since coming back from the World Cup. Alexander Isak has had well-documented injury problems, and since he came back, still looking a little bit on the fragile side. We wouldn't hang our hats on the strikers at the moment. So you feel that's our Achilles heel. But of course, defensively, we're probably the best in the Premier League. So, and traditionally, correct me if I'm wrong, Newcastle West Ham games aren't usually the ones you put in your top 10 video classics of all time. They're usually gritty affairs. We always used to go West Ham. I remember when you were a kid. Are you really? Should we go? Yeah, all right, we'll go. But I'm not expecting much of a game. Really, it's been like that for donkey's years. So I'm not really expecting any great fireworks this weekend either. 1-0 to us. You might get a 0-0 draw. It might be 1-1. But we do.
I can remember.
There's no antipathy. There's no antipathy towards West Ham on Newcastle fans' part. I was just thinking about this earlier, that there's quite a lot of players who have played for both clubs. You can start here at Noble and Carroll, and you can go back to your Brian Pop Robsons and people like that. And there's always been a little affinity there between the two sides. I don't think it's a sort of grudge match or anything like that.
There was something, and you might remember. In fact, Shaun, it might have been you that told me the story about
the
one game.
Yeah. After that,
what was that for anyone who doesn't know?
I think it was in the late 70s, but there was a firebomb launched from the Newcastle end into the away end of West Ham fans. It wasn't the away end; it was in paddock on the side of the pitch. I was at the game. I can almost still see it in the air, and that was a real low point of fan really out of control. And particularly because I didn't feel, as I say, there was great animosity towards West Ham. Since then, a few years on, there was a bit that, yes, obviously West Ham fans were very aggrieved about that. But I think in the last sort of few years, I think it's been relatively friendly. Obviously, you had that. I mean, if we're really going down this route, well, we, ICF and up and down on the trains, there was a bit of bit of trouble here and there. But actually, in the grounds, I always sensed it was always quite okay, apart from that particular instant. I've been to a fair few Newcastle West Ham games.
Yeah, since I've been going in the 90s, we've never like that. And it's funny you mentioned about the quality of the games. The only one I can remember as a standout, I think, was at Upton Park, and Michael Owen bagged at least 2, maybe a hat-trick. I think he'd done us about 4-0 or something. It was but other than that, I can't really remember any standout Newcastle games. So, Shaun, it's been absolutely brilliant having you join us on the podcast for the first time. Thanks so much for giving us your time. Just give us a quick score prediction. Saturday night evening at St James's Park in the Premier League, Newcastle v West Ham.
1-0 to us. There you go.
Yeah,
don't waste your time going up there. 1-0 to us.
No, I'm gonna picture a 1-1, but I think that's sort of the best that any West Ham fans are hoping. Certainly can't see us coming away with all 3. Just quickly, Shaun, thoughts on David Moyes as a juggernaut of the sports journalism game. What are your thoughts on David Moyes and his future at West Ham?
I mean, I'm a big David Moyes fan. I've had some clashes with him in the past. I like the fact he'll take you on and debate things from this is journalist's point of view. I quite like that. I see his enthusiasm. I see his passion, his belief in what he does. He's a proper passionate person about the job he does. He felt very aggrieved when he lost the West Ham job the first time round. I think you would all agree that he did a cracking job in the early days, second time round and first time around, to be honest. And maybe you've just been going through a bit of a blip, and maybe the future is bright again. But I don't get any bandwagon, why there would be any bandwagon to get him out of the job. I feel he's well suited to West Ham and that he can produce you decent teams. And he gave you a great season last season, didn't he?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. I think it just got to that stage where everyone's like, oh, it's gone staley. You're starting to lose people. Maybe a change needs making. But I think in the last 4 games, we've won 3 of them. Only conceded once, scored 4 through to the next round of the Cup. So not quite as bleak as it was maybe 4 weeks ago. But look, Shaun Custis here, head of sport at The Sun. Shaun, thanks so much for giving us your time, Shaun, for the